The bloody moon is all that the main character saw upon awakening, an overcast sky and many stars. He found himself in a place unfamiliar to him. There were many skeletons around, but the edges looked familiar, so he assumed that he had traveled back in time. As soon as the young man paid attention to his hands, he finally understood. He too had turned into a skeleton. Previously, he was a fairly successful young man who was studying and preparing to enter an elite college, although he had certain problems with society. Ahead, the boy noticed a revived monster. His eyes were burning, and he was not at all opposed to feasting on the remains of the protagonist's flesh. However, having picked up someone's leg, the young man was able to hit the monster's weak spot with one blow and kill him. True, the boy did not at all expect that this fight would not be the last. He relaxed and wanted to look around, and then he noticed a crowd of skeletons. In the thick red fog, one could see a couple of nearby monsters and many who were coming from somewhere far away. He didn't understand what these monsters wanted to do to him, because their look was quite strange, but there was nothing left but battle. Attempts to fight back did not last long. Soon, countless monsters knocked down the main character. But he did not die completely. Opening his eyes again, the guy noticed that he had moved back to the classroom where he was before. He just fell asleep. With Feng-Chi still alive, he finally understood the importance of avoiding death at all costs, and he hoped that he would not encounter such an ending in the future. The main character's class teacher was unhappy with such irresponsibility, so she decided to ask the young man a question from the upcoming exam. Despite his absent-mindedness, Feng-Chi was well prepared. He knew the history of their world by heart. The girl was interested in what year the world turning point began. The world turning point is usually called the sudden appearance of barriers within which there were hostile monsters. A little later, due to their appearance, humanity was able to detect spiritual energy. Cultivators began to actively study this issue, and after 500 years of research, they were able to bring their knowledge to almost perfection. Since the boy began to fall asleep again, his teacher asked one of his classmates to help and take Feng-Chi to the medical office. The girl working there at the same time decided to check all his characteristics and was not mistaken. Significant growth was noticeable, as if the guy was training for 10 hours every day instead of playing GTA 5. Previously, Feng-Chi, although he was a good student, had never shown such impressive results. So the worker assumed that the young man managed to get the elixir of the spirit. In this world, spiritual powers are pumped up in different ways. The use of elixirs is one of them, but the cost of the drugs is incredibly high. When the young man was left alone, he continued to study for 5 hours. He knew that in this world your position depends on strength. Only even he is not capable of working all day long and resting one day a week, so having completed studying the next paragraph, Feng-Chi collapsed on the bed. As soon as the boy closed his eyes, he found himself in the same place again. It was strange because earlier it seemed to him that it was just a lucid dream. Scratching his head a little, he decided not to waste time, but to go kill skeletons to level up and become stronger. The first target was found. Now Feng-Chi was not prey but a hunter, but he still did not dare to attack groups of skeletons. The monsters were not going to let themselves be killed just like that, so they fought back furiously and often caused damage to our genius. But remembering what kind of Sigma the main characters of such stories are, he took hold of the stick more tightly and began to smash the bodies of weak monsters with double force. Some success made the main character become a little happier, only he was worried that in order to leave this place, he would have to die. It was not worth thinking about this now, so our boy paid attention to the building nearby. It was extremely tall, and a huge inscription could be seen on the facade. Gradually moving down the stairs, the young man was able to reach the lowest floor, where there was a strange console and a large number of flasks. He decided to use strange technology in the hope of finding out what was happening here and why he appeared in this world. The young man's mood changed greatly when, in the last downloaded document, he noticed the date 3528. It was the distant future. So the guy decided to check his status. According to reports, his death occurred in 2032, which meant that the local area did not just look familiar. It was a fallen star city. The system also reported that approximately 500 years ago, each of the human cities was covered with a dome, and the monsters that appeared quickly destroyed most of the world's population. The main character was thinking about whether he could change the future if he did something in his time. He did not want to die and see the destroyed world in reality. Then he decided to change his fate by starting a search through the system. The young man wanted to find secret cultivation techniques, but found only a strange video. Even though the movements looked ridiculous, the boy still decided to repeat them. Besides, such a technique existed in his time, but it was not so updated. The spiritual energy, which had previously been peacefully in the air, rushed in rapid streams towards the body of the protagonist. But the boy's joy was short-lived. because soon a dark shadow with a strange sign on its forehead appeared nearby. It was definitely not in the mood for conversation. The young man was very scared, because he had never had to fight something like this before, but he wanted to become stronger, so he accepted the fight. The monster was incredibly fast, as if it had drunk Red Bull, so Feng Qi could not resist for long in this position and died again. As he expected earlier, after death his consciousness returns back to his body. But he wanted to test whether he could use the technique learned there at this time. Having performed a fiery dance, the guy was amazed at the amount of energy that rushed to his body. He was not sure that it should be so effective. Feng Qi was caught shirking his studies by his teacher. The beauty showed great hope for the guy's bright mind and really didn't want him to abandon his studies before the exams. Only at that time the young man was engaged in spiritual cultivation. Although it was not easy to believe, he still asked the woman to give him the opportunity to show him. When the guy performed this dance from the future, the aura in his body gradually began to intensify, and particles of energy around him became visible even to the naked eye. Now Feng Qi could proudly declare that he was not actually slacking. His training was simply cooler and more interesting than those offered by the school. He could confidently be called a genius, because the technique shown was not written down in any of the textbooks, which means that the main character was its author. The teacher put her hand on the guy's shoulder and told him that she now expects even more from him. So now the young talent should go to bed and continue his studies in the morning. As soon as the boy closed his eyes, he again found himself in that world of the future. He decided to take the skeleton bone and once again go to that strange place to challenge the shadow. But before Feng Qi could reach the building, the ground under his feet began to shake, and soon frightening sounds were heard from behind. It was a huge, carnivorous monster, which is a typical representative of the local fauna. He grabbed the young man and was ready to have a hearty lunch, but the stench from the monster's mouth brought the main character to consciousness, and he realized that he needed to get out. Using the bone, he struck a powerful blow, but it was not enough to win, so the young man struck again and again until the strong tail let him go. The guy was able to defeat the monster. It took almost all his strength, but he was still pleased with the success of this battle. Soon after the death of the worm, the guy's body acquired a human appearance and the wounds he received healed. He was able to increase his level. Now Feng Qi's confidence was sky high. He was ready to show his secret technique to the shadow living on the bottom floor of this strange building. The young man wanted to know the history of this world, because if he did not know all the details, he was unlikely to prevent the catastrophe that awaited them ahead. Previously, this world was prosperous, so the main character needed the knowledge of his descendants to become stronger. He was also interested in the end of the magic battle, but this was not so important. The year of the young man's death has changed, and thanks to its discovery, the class teacher will begin to create new cultivation techniques, achieving incredible success. The young man also managed to notice the vulnerability of the system. Showing the technique to his teacher, humanity strengthened it, and now at this time its level is more than 1,000. But the monster was not going to wait. The guy was not afraid of death. Because he knew that he would wake up in his bed, he wanted to show the barrier monster his tiger fighting fist of the third version. The next day, the main character's school was not particularly calm because the exams were gradually approaching and became a much greater threat than the shadow. But our boy had nothing to worry about. He and several other students were selected for transfer to a higher educational institution, at least for a while. The bus was supposed to take the main character straight to the Star City Academy, where Feng Qi could develop his skills and achieve incredible success. Ms. Wang asked the genius student not to forget that to achieve results you always need to make an effort. She promised to kill him if he starts to be lazy. The teacher had previously graduated from this academy and said that it was terrible, so the boy was skeptical until he saw the local buffet. He grabbed more free food. There were no rolls or pizza, but even the other dishes were incredibly tasty. Among the local students, the girl with the runic hand especially stood out. She also loved to eat, but no one dared to sit next to her. Time was short, so Feng Qi enjoyed his meal and went to the technique exchange class to learn new cultivation methods and share his own. The class was skeptical because they considered the main character to be an ordinary weakling. But everything changed as soon as he started talking about an extremely cool technique. One of the guys came later. He was amazed at how cool the main character taught, so he asked permission to listen to his lecture. As soon as the guy hesitated, the whole hall began chanting, "Continue the lecture." The boy could not refuse such an attitude. He taught everyone not only a special body cultivation technique, but also told them about the tiger fist, hoping that this technique would become more popular. A strange sound attracted the young man's attention. He decided to check it out and came across the same girl from the dining room who was playing the flute. She did an excellent job, despite the fact that the hand with the symbol usually interferes in everyday life, showing results only in bloody battles. The beauty's name was Mu Qing. She was truly amazed by the courage of the protagonist, because other students decide not to even approach her. The girl was surprised because she thought that all the students knew about her, but our Feng Qi was a transfer student, so he could not boast of such information. Returning home, he decided to carefully study the internet to see if there were any entries about this white-haired beauty. Besides, her hand looked very threatening. But the only thing we could find out about was the girl's strength. She was a rune fighter. Such a warrior could fight alone against an entire army. As a rule, there was a special mark on their body, which was the source of the cursed power. But the curse did not always work to the disadvantage of the owner. The guy also found out about the guy who came later than everyone else. It was Lin Ran. His talent had already been recognized by the entire research community. He resembled Miss Wang in his skill. Deciding not to give in to any of them, the young man squeezed his eyes tightly and wanted to fall asleep as soon as possible so that he could hit home runs with the head of skeletons again. When the young man got to that research center, he decided to check the information about Mu Qing, hoping to find out if she was in any danger. As it turned out, the girl will betray people, resume research on creating rune fighters, and also unleash a full-scale war in which many innocent people will die. The main character carefully studied the mission, during which his girlfriend went against humanity, but did not find any problems in the task itself. Since Mu Qing's betrayal led to a huge number of deaths, the data about her was almost completely encrypted. Now the main character had several options. He could either let it happen or try to prevent a disaster. His thoughts were interrupted by the barrier monster, which was patiently waiting until the main character was one step away from finding a solution to kill him in the most effective way. Waking up, Feng Qi was not very happy with such a death. This shadow was a real cheater who killed him over and over again without a chance. The guy went to bed again, but to his surprise, he didn't go to another world, but just had a good night's sleep. He was worried that he might have lost the power to move between time. In addition, since that evening, he had not left a terrible feeling of hunger, so the first thing our young man did was go to the dining room. He thought that he had taken too much and that it looked strange, until he noticed one curious man who, as always, was dining alone. Mocha took herself a huge amount of food, but the main character did not want to give in. Besides, the more he eats, the more energy he has to move. At least it seemed so to him. Taking his portion, he took it to his friend's table to eat together. It seemed to him that she was very lonely. The main character decided to borrow Mu Qing's meatloaf, while the rest of the students didn't understand how he could even be near a girl. The guys even had a small fight over food. No one wanted to give away the last wing to KFC, so they fought very actively. The boy insisted there that he was the youngest, so his sister had to share with him. Only the girl herself wanted to enjoy the delicious fast food. Her heart melted when our young man spoke those words again. Taking food from the poor young Kohai was too much even for someone like her. Soon, Feng Qi finally filled his belly. The food in this cafeteria was unlimited, so he could easily eat his fill without disturbing anyone. Having eaten deliciously, the young man decided to make friends with the girl, but she did not expect this at all. Earlier, the rest of the students had only shied away from her appearance. She ran away, making the protagonist feel like an idiot, so he went to the library to study various information about cultivation. While reading the next manual, Feng Qi did not notice how the same blonde man from class approached him. The guy was no less passionate about studying. This time, Lin Ran decided to meet first, because he listened carefully to the lectures of the main character, but they never spoke outside the classroom. The day passed quite quickly due to the episode with Mu Qing and the appearance of a cultivator interested in the techniques of the main character. Each meal restored quite a bit of the energy scale, so no matter how much the main character tried to sleep, he constantly found himself in a normal dream. He decided to order various products from the internet, which were supposed to help in cultivating spiritual abilities. Among all the strange and frankly useless things, there was an unusual pebble. It strongly resembled diamonds from Minecraft, which attracted the attention of Feng Qi. Since the main pumping took place in the future, the boy had to try and replenish his energy reserves as soon as possible. But getting inside turned out to be not such a big task compared to what awaited the young man ahead. A large number of things indicated that this was the world of the future, including the complexity of programs and equipment, so Feng Qi could only stare. At least the skeletons remained simple. If you kill, you get experience, an excellent option for those who don't want to think about it. Now, after the murder, the boy felt changes in his body. He had pumped up so much that he had muscles no worse than Andrew Tate. This world demanded that someone be found who would conquer it, and the guy wanted to ride this wave. The boy's first goal was victory over the shadow. Before he could start planning, the system notified him of the approach of an incredibly strong opponent who, like the rune monster, could quickly kill the guy. It was a huge monster in the form of a ball with a large eye in the center. It flew in the sky and definitely watched everyone with contempt. Now the main character had no choice but to dodge all the attacks. His clothes became even more damaged. After a few minutes of catching up, the monster still firmly grabbed the main character. It hoped to feast on him today. True, Fengqi's main nightmare was going to prevent this. The Black Shadow watched the entire fight, initially not planning to interfere. With deft movements, she reached the monster. Despite the fact that it was very high, the stones scattered around the area helped in this. One precise blow killed the monster, and Fengqi fell to the ground. He could not understand why the monster understood him and helped him in difficult situations. But even if it was just an accident, the main character wanted to make full use of it to win not just 1 year, but at least 100. There was a large monster behind a stone nearby. It watched the young man with interest but did not take any action. One way or another, the presence of such a big man at his side greatly frightened the young man. He began to think through a retreat plan, hoping to get out of this battle alive. The monster slowly generated a strange substance that resembled soap bubbles combined with rubber. Upon contact with them, the boy's body was not damaged at all. It was difficult for him to believe it, but even a thorough check could not understand what it was. Fengqi decided to take the chance and not tempt fate, so he attacked the monster with his right hand. And then he took out a stick and performed a combo of blows that he had spied on a student in college today. Now he was becoming not only stronger, but also more experienced. After defeating this monster, the level really grew rapidly. The main character was incredibly happy about such success. The next morning he had no energy at all. He woke up with severe hunger and muscle pain, but he still had to go to school. In the dining room, the main character again came across Mu Qing. They see each other quite often because they both love to eat, but the girl did not want to be friends with him. She suggested that they talk under more appropriate circumstances if the young man really wanted to become friends. Soon the blonde man approached him. He was amazed that his teacher liked other people. He thought that Fengqi was a hickey or some kind of nerd. In the evening, a beautiful flute playing could be heard near the river. Mu Qing continued to practice her hobby away from people so as not to disturb anyone. Suddenly her arm was out of control, covered in reddish irritations, and the veins dilated. The main character found her in this state. Now she was definitely not in the mood for a friendly conversation. But as soon as the guy touched his girlfriend, he was transported to a strange place with a lot of broken mirrors. Somewhere far away in this black place, little Mu Qing was with a flute in her hands. She desperately needed support, but no one was around. Then a door appeared in the middle of the void, from which a tall woman with red hair came out. She was interested in the girl, so she decided to take her. Mu Qing wasn't sure if this was what she really wanted, but she had little choice in this situation. Now the girl's state resembled a berserker's fight. She did not try to restrain herself at all, attacking with her black hand in a serious manner. It was not for nothing that our boy was good at eloquence, so he managed to convince his girlfriend that now everything would be much better. This time they managed to overcome the attack of anger, but Mu Qing was worried that it might happen again, so they began to often communicate with the main character. The guy promised to stop his girlfriend's madness again if something happened, and besides, she didn't scare him at all, which bribed the girl. Having finally received the favor of his girlfriend, the guy wanted to become a friend for another genius who, like him, did not see a threat in the Rune Fighters. They could become the new number 7 team, but for this they needed to become even stronger, because Fengqi believed that he was still inferior to his friends. The lessons passed one by one. The main character showed great success as a teacher and was grateful for the opportunity. But after the next class, he thought that he had nothing more to teach his beloved students. All his knowledge had already been presented in past lectures. He decided to meet with the director and discuss this issue. The man did not immediately recognize our Fengqi. He tried for a long time to guess which school he was from. But the conversation became much more friendly. As soon as the boy mentioned Teacher Wang, it seemed that the two knew each other. Having made a lucrative offer to the young talent, the man sent him into free sailing for a while, so the main character decided to immediately go to a meeting with Mu Qing. Having arrived earlier, he noticed one unusual situation. The blonde found herself in a difficult situation. She was bothered by local hooligans who considered her cursed. One of the bad girls even slapped Mu Qing, which was against the rules of the school, but she didn't seem to care at all. Linran decided to intervene in what was happening. He was not satisfied with this treatment, and he promised to cause a lot of problems for the red-haired woman, as well as her friends. When it came to protecting the weak, the blonde could not hold back, showing how dangerous he was if angered. Even though the hooligans were scared off, the girl's flute was extremely damaged and could hardly be repaired. The main character took the instrument in his hands and began to think about how to help Mu Qing, because this thing was definitely of great importance to her. The girl asked not to worry about it, because even though today she lost the instrument she had previously given, she was able to gain something more important. So now she was not angry and was ready to share her food with the main character, who ate so much that even Luffy from One Piece would envy him. With this, they decided to form an alliance. Now they are a team. Although they have known each other for a short time, they managed to form strong bonds. True, the origin of the runic hand greatly worried the guy. Besides, that woman in red still did not leave his memory. There was only one way out: to turn to a knowledgeable person. The director immediately said that the affairs of the family from which Mu Qing came are quite secret, so he doesn't know much. But the man could still share some rumors. He said that earlier the corporation that took the baby carried out experiments to strengthen people. In other words, receiving the rune in the body is their fault. They forced the girl to become the bearer of such power, even though it was destructive not only to Mu Qing's enemies, but also to herself. In general, this plan was not particularly successful. People infected with runes could maintain control over their bodies for only a short time, after which they were consumed by anger. The main character was determined to understand this issue, so he went to the world of the future, hoping to get useful information from that research center. At the same time, he was also engaged in cultivation, because Feng Qi had established himself as a genius, so he could not lower the bar and lose his reputation. True, sometimes his fun with Lin Ran went too far, but they managed to become even closer. Things were similar with Mu Qing. They became close friends, so the girl shared her plans for the future. She wanted to complete her parents' research. The topic of his girlfriend's fate became more and more interesting for the main character. He decided to go to the Scarlet Research Institute at the invitation received to find answers to his questions. The security system of this building was truly amazing. Every passage and door required an identification badge or card. But even so, our elusive protagonist was able to get rid of the overseer and go into one of the rooms where he was definitely not allowed. The lower floors were filled with reptilians. These creatures experimented on a man chained in chains, trying to get some effect. Now this matter was completely strange, but the main character could only get answers in the future, although he still did not avoid trying. It was possible to make sure that actions taken in the past have an impact on the future quite quickly. Since there were no allies who could share the secret of the 2 time points, the young man contacted himself from the future. Now things were really bad. As his matured image told the main character, the future Feng Qi warned himself. The Scarlet Institute is too strong. This huge corporation keeps terrifying secrets, but the young man was not ready to confront it now, so there was no talk of open confrontation. The main character was now even more angry at the bastards who forced his girlfriend to endure such horrors. Besides, experiencing dark enhancements in public was unforgivable. Now leveling up in the world of the future did not give much experience, but the guy continued to chop up skeletons left and right. Now he could cope with even a dozen at a time. However, soon his spider. The instinct worked. The shadow was approaching and preparing to attack, so Feng Qi urgently needed to hide from this place. Hiding in nearby debris, the young man managed to avoid meeting the black monster, who was actively trying to find the boy and make a kebab out of him. Traveling through the city, which had been destroyed for many years, the young man hoped not to encounter anything even more serious than that shadow. But his failure to reach the maximum level led to the opposite, so within a minute, the boy was standing in front of a huge demonic rhinoceros. He was a little amused by this situation, but he didn't know how to deal with the demon in this situation, so he decided to quietly leave since the monster was still sleeping. Only the boy apparently thought too loudly, so the monster began to slowly open his eyes. When it noticed an uninvited guest on its territory, it went into a rage, starting to destroy the entire environment with the help of its strong body. The main character had no choice but to run as fast as he could and hope that he didn't meet someone else along the way. The monster chased him and did it very effectively. Soon the guy again found himself in a death trap. The rhinoceros drove him to a cliff. The monster wanted to feast on human flesh, but was distracted by someone who was nearby, this figure called him. The same shadow was sitting on top of the stones. This time, for some reason, she decided to stand up for the main character. It was difficult to understand what was in her head. The 2 monsters were planning to start a fight. It is too unrealistic to predict who will emerge victorious from this duel. After all, even after receiving serious damage, the shadow restored its body as if nothing had happened at all. Feng Qi, meanwhile, was hoping to quickly get away while his enemies were fighting among themselves for the right to finish him off, when suddenly he came across a huge number of weak monsters. Moving close to the walls, the boy tried not to make sounds because this could provoke a wolf sleeping peacefully nearby. The main character was interested in how that duel ended, but he didn't really want to go back to find out, so the guy just sat down calmly. Only even this way he didn't have peace of mind, because strange sounds were coming from the depths of the room, and eyes glowing in the dark predicted huge problems. The guy was already ready to say goodbye to his life when he noticed a strange white sphere flying towards him at high speed. But he calmed down when he noticed that it was a local monster, who for some reason did not hate Feng Qi, although he looked really creepy. The boy was not a furry, so he preferred to avoid this kind of acquaintance, but this time apparently he would not be able to leave so easily. The strange rabbit was behaving strangely, moving quickly, not staying in one place for too long. Only two things could be said for sure. Now the main character was an order of magnitude weaker than this strange thing, and she also fell in love with the boy very much. It didn't lag behind, no matter how the main character tried to scare away or throw away this thing, so he decided to call it Velcro. The wolf nevertheless noticed the main character and his new partner. His form was unusual, but thanks to it he could effectively catch up with prey within this city. Despite the difference in size, Velcro easily dealt with the monster. She only needed one hit to do it. Size is not the main thing. The young man was 100% convinced of this today. Besides, it was obvious that now it was definitely impossible to drive away Velcro. The main character took the rabbit in his arms and began to stroke it. Like a pet, Velcro was pleased. And Feng Qi himself was even more happy, because he had received an incredibly strong ally who might be able to cope with the shadow. They reached a very beautiful place, a bloody sea and huge rocks. There was no more calm and peaceful landscape in this place. Suddenly, Velcro jumped out of her arms and went into the depths of the forest, forcing the main character to stand in incomprehension because he could not read her thoughts. Following his nakama, the young man came across a beautiful tree that looked like sakura. This place was definitely important to the rabbit. The guy asked if Velcro wanted him to see this place because they might never return here again. Then the rabbit became very depressed and jumped back into the arms of the main character, even though they had not known each other for so long. But the young man was imbued with the feelings of his new friend. However, they still had unfinished business, so the main character walked to the edge of the annex nearby to look around. The shadow was chasing him, and Feng Qi knew this very well. He was not sure that he would be able to cope with this monster now. There was no need to wait for the dark monster. He appeared behind him as if out of nowhere and was ready to send the main character to the present time. Velcro decided to stand up for the young man. She jumped off her friend's shoulder and rushed towards the enemy, hoping to inflict serious damage on him. We've seen before that the rabbit's size doesn't match its strength, so Velcro might actually have a chance of winning. The guy was amazed at how strong his nakama really was. He was also glad that this monster did not become an enemy. Meanwhile, he himself decided to go to the research center because he could not help in the battle. Only before the guy had time to copy anything, heavy sounds were heard behind him, which clearly did not correspond to Velcro's dimensions. Having died once again, the young man was transported to his world, intending to find out how to increase his strength and oppose the powerful monster. True, exams interfered with this, which the guy completely forgot about. Despite his position, he, like other students, is forced to take special tests. Even though there was an incredibly lot of things to do, our main character was as strong a strategist as Caesar, so he could easily deal with several things at once. But even geniuses like him need rest, so from time to time the guy went outside to relax and think. He remembered that after moving, he ended up with a flute in his hands, given by Velcro, which means he could earn a few more friendship points with the blonde. At the next meeting, the young man actually gave Muqing the found musical instrument. It was not the same as her previous flute, but not inferior in quality. The girl was touched by such a gift because no one had tried this way for her before, so she decided to repay her friend for her help. Lectures for students continued, and teacher Feng Qi had more and more fans. Many of them asked tricky questions like this guy, but the young man prepared for good reason, so he deftly found a solution for each situation. Although it was not easy for him and several times his knowledge failed him, so he had to bet on his luck. One way or another, at the end of the pair, the young man began to think about how he could defeat the shadow. If he could cope with it, he would receive the necessary amount of knowledge. True, it was not possible to come up with all the suitable options. Then the boy decided to unwind with Muqing, who had just invited him for a walk. They decided to meet near the reservoir where they first saw each other. This meeting could have been romantic in nature, especially considering that the main character is Sigma. But alas, Muqing was interested in why the young man was kind to her, even made a fuss and got hold of a valuable thing that was definitely worth a lot of money. Only Feng Qi himself did not think that he had done anything special. He believed that the treatment of the blonde was too unfair. His principles were such that he tried to help everyone he could. He asked the next time if a girl gets harassed or has some kind of trouble, to turn to him because he is always ready to help his friends. The grateful Mu Qing responded in kind. Now they were real best friends. The guy returned to his dormitory, where his friend named Mo Fei honestly said that he hated him, because an ordinary student is forced to work for days while a genius like the main character is doing nothing. Our Fengqi could choose where to go, because for his merits he would be accepted into any university, while the rest grabbed at any opportunity. Suddenly, unexpectedly, Mo Fei mentioned the Scarlet Research Institute. This place has recently been of particular interest to the protagonist. Despite his behavior, Mo Fei could easily be called the same genius. He entered a cool institute, and the mentor went her own way to study spiritual power. Fengqi did not want to lag behind. The young man decided to take admission a little more seriously, so he came early. There really were a lot of people. The monk especially stood out among everyone. He decided to be the first to speak to the main character and told him where he needed to go to register. The boy was inspired by the fact that faith pushes many people to study, but in fact, the monk was enrolled as an applicant by his mentor, who was dissatisfied with how easy the young man was living. Other applicants were not particularly happy that two strange freaks were near the entrance, so they told them to go through and not linger. During the time spent inside the exchange program, the young man managed to acquire a good reputation even among hooligans because he never brought them down or gave them bad grades. But the guys had questions about the monk. They decided to find out if he was a normal person in a special way, using a massage with bats. While the believer was undergoing initiation, the main character sat on a bench and thought about whether he could buy Mr. Beast chocolate here, because he really wanted to eat. There was little time, so the main character went straight to the director. He had a conversation with the man, and he decided to listen carefully to Fengqi. The young man's main request was to enroll him as a teacher. He had previously proven his knowledge, so there was no problem with this. At their academy, each student was approached individually. Because they were an elite educational institution, so many talents flourished here. The day ended quickly enough, so the guy went to sleep and again moved to another world. He decided to check his future now. Information about a man named Fengqi was indeed changed. His contribution to the development of humanity increased again, but in the end, it was decided to execute him for treason. Many believe that the main character, in an attempt to do better, crossed the line and then went completely off the rails, committing many atrocities. Mu Qing appeared to save her friend. She wanted to take the young man with her on a journey. In this timeline, she did not destroy half the world, but became a respected master. The young man refused until the last moment. At first, the girl insisted on her own, but she could not convince him, so the guy simply accepted his punishment. Noticing the confidence in the eyes of the main character, the girl could not simply take him by force. She accepted his decision and hurried to leave, because she could not watch this execution. It was now obvious that despite his actions, Fengqi was destined to die young. He decided to do everything to improve the lives of others while he lived. This news immediately delighted and disappointed the boy. He does not need to devote time to many things because he will not even live to become an old man. But the guy was not going to give up in this situation. His aspirations seemed to be made of steel. They were even stronger than my relationship. When the boy left the research center, he came across Velcro, who was pouring cherry juice out of a snake before turning it into sashimi. Nearby, they noticed a strange cloud of black smoke. Then the main character decided to take a closer look and was a little upset. A shadow was approaching them at great speed, definitely planning to send the guy to another time loop. Over the times that the monster killed him, he was able to understand several different ways to live a little longer, so he decided to use everything. The boy, remembering the default method of combat from video games, decided to pit several opponents against each other at once to gain time. The shadow was the enemy of all creatures at this time, so they were able to calmly go with Velcro to that very tree. To the surprise of the main character, the same flute that he had previously given to Mu Qing was buried under it. He did not immediately guess what this could mean, but he looked carefully at his only friend in this dark and bloody world. To make sure he was right, Fengqi decided to ask the rabbit about this little thing. If it could be used by him, then he wanted to hear the singing. Even though this might give away their location to the shadow, Velcro decided to use the tool. This melody reminded the main character of his friend Mu Qing. Then he realized that Velcro was somehow connected with the girl, or was it herself? But for some reason, she had changed her form. Soon they returned to the research center again. The rabbit was very tired, so he decided to rest a little in the arms of the main character. The young man himself was amazed, because he came across a door that he had never seen in this place before. From his loud screams, Velcro woke up, but Fengqi didn't know how to open this gate without knowing the password. His partner also carefully studied the environment for clues. Not finding any option, the rabbit knocked out the wall with one blow, and the young man himself praised her for such an effective method of solving the problem. Inside, there was something similar to a laboratory. There were flasks with strange creatures. They vaguely resembled monsters. The young man decided to approach one of them to take a closer look, and then realized how gigantic they really were. But this was not the end. Behind the next door were lush orchards full of apple trees. The guys decided not to miss this opportunity and picked a couple. In the next room, there was a strange body with a hole inside, as if someone had previously taken care to pull out the heart from the inside. There was also data about the shadow monster that had been chasing the main character all this time, but nothing useful could be found among this data. Unexpectedly, the culprit himself came to see them. He had somehow changed since their last meeting, but the young man did not understand exactly how. The monster began to actively attack our guys, but as you know, fast legs are not afraid of punishment, so the main character began to run towards the exit. He took Velcro with him, who carefully examined her flute, not understanding why her friend reacted this way. Soon the shadow was able to drive them into a corner. There was nothing else to do but ask the rabbit to enter into battle with a cheating opponent. No matter how the white monster tried to harm the shadow, no damage had an effect on the monster. It continued to actively attack them as if nothing had happened. Throwing the rabbit away, the black monster began to attack Feng Qi. It quickly grabbed the young man by the throat and planned to make a stuffed animal out of him. But the trick that Velcro saved the main character from being forced to cut off his head from his body. The impact was so strong that the surrounding walls and ceilings broke, filling the space with a lot of debris. Despite the spectacle, the monster could not be defeated, and he sent Feng Qi back to his time again so that he could prepare even better. This day turned out to be special because he met a guy who was considered an incredible genius on par with him in this academy. Thanks to the future, the boy learned that someone around him was a traitor who would one day stab him in the back. They had special preparations. Everyone was tired, but only this genius looked calm as if he had just woken up, so Feng Qi began to suspect him. The boy didn't really notice our main character. His gaze was cold and very sharp, so it wasn't very comfortable to communicate with such a person. True, the red-haired man himself did not plan to speak, so as soon as Feng Qi asked his name, he immediately turned around and left. Then the guy decided to contact the rector, hoping to get support, but he could only give a name. This man's name was Lu Yue. His abilities and family were confidential. Such an answer could not suit our boy, so he was ready to tear and throw, but the old man said that such behavior would definitely not change anything. All the old man could say now was that Lu Yue was from Tongtian Road, but this name belonged to the street, city, or road. It was not clear, although there was good news. Recently, a special competition was announced with a large prize fund. If the main character takes part in it, he will receive 3 million from the university. The question remained open. Who is the mole around the young man? Perhaps it was 3 stupid jocks who resolved all issues by force. Or a guy who looked good-natured but could be doing some dangerous research at night. This could be speculated endlessly, so it is impossible to come to any more or less sane conclusion. The only one who haunted the main character Zero was Lu Yue. He infuriated not only Feng Qi, but also the other guys, while many girls were crazy about him. One of the jocks decided to teach the impudent guy a lesson, but it was not difficult for him to dodge the blow that was delivered from the blind spot. Next, the strong student wanted to use a finishing blow from above, but was neutralized by one precise blow to the neck. Lu Yue really looked the most suspicious of everyone. His skills and endurance could indicate that he belonged to some kind of organization. The main character himself decided to take on the role of Sherlock Holmes. He was confident that he would be able to find out more information if he fulfilled the director's request. It would be very bad if this person really turned out to be his opponent, because despite his knowledge and all his power-ups, Feng Qi was not confident of victory. Watching the suspicious man, the boy noticed a strange connection between the silent nerd and this red-haired warrior. According to data from the future, Lao Yue had many brilliant achievements in fighting domain invasions in the early years, and also participated in several domain field scattering operations. If he became such an outstanding master in the future, then the person he was accompanying could also be a suspect. The main character decided to go to the Scarlet Research Institute to check everything personally. But during the inspection, a listening chip was discovered in his body. He was detained because they believed that the guy could be involved in industrial espionage, but his dorm roommate did not believe in it. In one of the branches, the boy betrayed all the members of the Dawn group, which included his blonde girlfriend, those muscle men, as well as Lu Yue, who was executed in secret. Then the whole world was in serious danger. Many world leaders and corporations showed their true colors, and he could only watch it. At this time, Velcro became close to the red-haired woman from Mu Qing's memories. This was strange because the rabbit usually did not approach people. The shadow was already approaching, so the guy left the building and went to level up. He needed to reach level 100 to become strong, like Song Jin-woo from the anime Leveling Up Alone. Killing many monsters greatly increased his characteristics. Now the boy could jump and thereby increase his speed many times over. He also began to study the contents of this world, because the flora and fauna were extremely diverse and unusual. The boy's attention was also attracted by various buildings. Many of them, at first glance, performed very important functions. Inside this mysterious building, there was an equally mysterious hidden passage. To find it, we even had to break the wall. But on the other side, there was only a passage to another part of the desert, where a strange demon, definitely associated with the occult, was meditating. The guy decided to move a little closer to examine the creature, because if it was powerful enough, then he could pit it against the shadow. Only Feng Qi himself did not expect that everything would go according to a completely different scenario. The shadow appeared much earlier, which meant that Velcro was defeated. The monster was in no particular hurry to attack, because it noticed a strange creature not far from the main character. Only the ram demon was not going to interfere in the battle, but only wanted to see how it would end, so he stepped aside, showing it. Having received the opportunity to attack, the shadow, as ferociously as venom, headed towards the main character, hoping to quickly destroy him. The young man was not so simple. Hard training eventually paid off. He managed to dodge a series of rapid attacks. The monster was not about to let go of its prey, so it used all its speed and hurried after Feng Qi, who was trying to climb into an incomprehensible structure. It seemed to him that this was the entrance to some kind of cave. His plans were to confuse the shadow among the tunnels, and then get out and run away somewhere. It was really not easy to get inside. Many obstacles, narrow openings, and the lack of light were very difficult. Fortunately, he had with him the fruit of one of the flowers that he had examined earlier. Inside the cave was a strange-looking amber, which was worshipped by several of the same ram demons. Each of them had unique horns. The landing was not very soft, so our boy took some time to recover. The demons turned their attention to their guest, but did nothing for a long time, continuing to look angrily in his direction. After a few more minutes, they turned to the stone in the center and began to praise it, because what was hidden inside would soon come out. The main character watched this from the side and wondered whether he should run or this thing would not be hostile. The huge golden stone began to glow. Incredibly bright and warm rays filled the inside of the cave, making Feng Qi await the birth of a miracle with trepidation. Having pulled himself together, the guy decided to throw away the strange thoughts that were coming into his head. He used the tiger fist to destroy the cocoon. However, before the boy's hand reached the surface of the amber, a dozen barriers of varying lengths and thicknesses appeared in front of him, and behind him, a ram monster instantly appeared, planning to detain the intruder and later feed him to their deity. At this moment, the young man's energy, thanks to that very pearl, began to rapidly increase, and now he could awaken a special power. The monster finally emerged from the cocoon. It was a large demonic kid of enormous size which reached out to devour the young man, but was quickly killed with a precise blow. The monster's body fell in front of the young man. According to the system, there was a particularly important object inside, which definitely should not have been lost sight of. His fist left a huge hole in the monster's body from which the heart of the incarnation of the demon god could be seen. He tore it out, and jelly flowed from there, which the monsters brought as a gift. The young man trusted the system and absorbed the demon's heart. His body began to grow at an incredible pace, as if he had learned a secret cocktail recipe from his trainer at the gym. With his eyes filled with anger and steam coming out of his mouth, it might have looked like Feng Qi had lost control. But in reality, everything was fine. The black shadow was finally able to reach them and attacked the main character and the ram demons standing next to him. However, they decided not to endure and fought back, showing that this monster had entered the wrong area. They tried to destroy it with the help of fire magic. When the body was divided into two parts, a group of creatures raised a shadow and began to roast him, hoping that he would not escape al dente from this fiery trap. The shaman began to pray for the success of his relatives because the power of the horns allowed them to use special magical powers. The guy who lost his arm after the appearance of a creature from amber was able to easily restore it, after which he proudly rushed upward. The restored hand was strangely shaped and looked extremely dangerous, but at the same time, the main character understood how effective it could be. His jump turned out to be so strong that, despite the thick layer of rock, he jumped quite high. Only at the last moment his strength left him. When he landed, he noticed that his body had become small again, as if he had not exercised for an eternity, and besides, he was tormented by terrible hunger. A lone skeleton wandered nearby, armed with a stone, but rushed to attack the monster. Its second arm, which had been restored, seemed a little smaller. As expected, raising the level was still able to replenish his stamina, and now the young man planned to continue his wandering through this world with renewed vigor. But even though he was much stronger now, the problem with the shadow was unlikely to be completely solved, so he was on guard. When a huge dragon suddenly flew over his head, at that moment Feng-Chi realized that he was far from the most formidable predator in these parts. The majestic demon didn't even pay attention to someone as small as the main character, because he would have to eat 100 of them to get enough. While there was an opportunity, the boy rushed to the tree that Velcro had shown him earlier, hoping that his comrade in arms would be alive. Having reached the place, he could only observe a couple of monsters, a little reminiscent of scorpions from his world. A moment later, the monster lay defeated, and the wounded Velcro ate the defeated monster with incredible appetite. At this moment, the main character remembered his friend, who could easily set a world record for eating Shake Shack hot dogs. He was glad to see Velcro again, because she saved his life, and more than once the rabbit reciprocated. Their journey was not long, but they managed to become good friends. Soon a shadow appeared, and without any problems she was able to deal with the ram demons who were trying to hold her. The guy was disappointed, because despite the incredible strength, even a group of wizards could not do anything to oppose this monster. The guy was too relaxed, so he missed the moment when the shadow appeared above him. Unlike other monsters, it gradually became stronger. Velcro once again helped save the guy's life. She was very angry at the monster who wanted to kill her dear and only friend. It was impossible to dissuade the monster from fighting, so the main character decided to let her attack the shadow again, realizing that in extreme cases she would return after re-entering the point in time. He remembered the words of his roommate, who talked about how hard he had to be to achieve his desired goal. Then the young man began to strive to understand the secret of his strength, gradually restoring the same strength as in that form. Doubts were also nearby, because no matter how many times Feng-Chi fought with the shadow, no matter how many times he dragged other monsters into battle, victory always eluded him. This time the boy planned to change everything, and achieve success with the help of special techniques and artifacts that were stored inside this room. A special tablet reflected the meaning of martial and spiritual arts, even if it did not stand out for its value in this world, but it helped the boy reach a new level. He knew that if he didn't cope now, he would hardly ever be able to turn the outcome in the right direction. The guy also clearly saw Mu Qing's image. They had become quite close recently, so he wanted to make her happy. The answer definitely lay in the runes that were on his girlfriend's hand and on the forehead of the shadow, which so effectively dealt with all his ideas for murder. When the young man left the research center, the battle between Sticky and the Black Demon continued. Despite his invincibility and incredible strength, the motivated rabbit managed to inflict significant damage on the shadow. However, having turned into clouds of dark smoke, the monster began to laugh creepily, gradually decomposing into more and more clouds. After a few moments, all these particles formed a black hole, which began to suck the life energy from everything that surrounded it. Even the weakest skeletons got it, and having given up their energy, they could no longer move or use any techniques. Gradually collecting more and more energy, the ball grew. It seemed as if in its center there was a small copy of the Milky Way. When the absorption was completed, the shadow not only restored its shape, it became an order of magnitude stronger and taller, which means it became even more difficult to defeat it. The main character was amazed at how dishonest monsters could be. Even if they took that dragon, he had no idea how to defeat it. But unlike the reptile, the shadow was trying to destroy Feng-Chi, so he was forced to come up with some option to stay alive. Only in a fit of rage did the Black Demon forget about the existence of Sticky, who tried to attack from the blind spot, but could not hit the monster. She bombarded him with a whole hail of attacks, each of which would have easily broken the wall, but this was still not enough for victory. Suddenly, the monster began to disintegrate into black smoke again, only this time was different from the last. The number of clouds increased significantly. When the body of the shadow was completely dissolved, huge pins appeared along the entire perimeter, heading straight towards the sky. Before the young man had time to react, the shadow next to his hand again took on a tangible form. It seemed that within this space it could move faster. However, now the young man could rely not only on the strength of Velcro, he had a dangerous trump card hidden up his sleeve that would help him emerge victorious. The monster was suspicious but still continued to attack, hoping to quickly kill the main character. Feng-Chi turned out to be surprisingly quick because he dodged all attacks, coming close to the shadow, which definitely did not expect such a move. The young man tightly grasped the demon's torso, planning to perform a deflection throw, but coping with such a strange body turned out to be extremely difficult. In such circumstances, the best thing the main character came up with was to switch to an attack. He began to deliver one blow after another at incredible speed. And when the defense was finally broken, he gave the shadow his signature uppercut with his right hand. He stood in a victory pose because he thought that he had finally defeated his sworn enemy. The shadow lay motionless for several seconds, but the loss of vigilance cost Feng Qi too much. The monster cut off his left arm with one attack and then began to rapidly regenerate. Only now, the guy was ready for this, so he began to awaken the power he had received earlier. Thanks to that tablet, he could release power at any moment. The size of the main character increased many times, as if he were Mario and ate a mushroom, turning into his super form. The previously severed arm appeared again, only this time it looked much more terrifying, with a huge stone horn growing from its torso. At this moment, the shadow did not quite understand what was happening at all, since earlier, due to the magic of the ram demons, she had not seen this transformation. One way or another, this did not stop her from sending the main character to heaven with just one attack, which Feng Qi was simply unable to dodge, so he decided to eat. The protagonist's appetite surprised his friends. He ate almost every day, but his figure remained unchanged. The blonde talked about how such a lifestyle was harmful, and if the young man needed energy for training, then there were other ways to get it. In the evening, a mysterious package was delivered to the young man's house. Inside was a set of strange things, but the boy still guessed who exactly sent him this treasure. Inside, there were many useful things that helped in cultivating and obtaining new energy. The strange round medallions turned out to be especially valuable. It is unlikely that the main character with his salary would have had enough money for such things. Since things were going well, he decided to celebrate his first successes with his friends. He chose a great drink and grabbed a couple of glasses. This decoction consisted of many different plants that helped restore strength and also gave resistance to various magic. The protagonist's friend was well versed in such things. He passed the subject on flora and fauna with an A, getting the best result in their university. The guy decided to take a sip first, so that others would not have to worry about their condition, even if the drink was healthy and very pleasant to the taste. As soon as the girl took just one sip, her hand with the rune began to glow with a bright white light. It stopped bothering her with terrible pain. The main character knew about this effect of this drug, so he decided to drink it not alone but with his friends, and the girl promised to repay him for his kindness. Although the young man did not need this, he only wanted to spend his youth as happily as now in the company of people dear to his heart. The next day he came across a bunch of bad guys while he was inside the research center. For some reason he saw their future as well. In it, they happily wanted the main character to be executed for treason, so his attitude towards them was a little negative. Even though at this time they did not have time to harm the young man in any way, he did not want to get involved with these people, so he simply ignored their question. Soon the young man again moved into the future. The wasteland looked the same as always, which means that his actions have not yet had a significant impact on this time. He was ready to face new challenges because before falling asleep he had a hearty meal, which means that he will leave this world only if he is killed. Throwing off his cape, Feng Qi met the shadow with dignity, which began to look even more threatening and dangerous. The monster, without any extra thoughts, began to attack the main character, hoping to send him back again, as had already happened. However, the guy decided not to waste time on trifles, and immediately began to use his strong techniques. Of course, they could not compare with the power of Velcro, but they helped buy time. The battle turned out to be too difficult, and the young man suffered a crushing defeat. He wanted to try again, but the food simply wouldn't fit into his throat. Defeating this boss turned out to be as difficult as going through the ice skating rink in Bill Stars, but he did not plan to give up, so after filling his stomach with various foods, he went to sleep again. The first thing the boy always did was check the research institute, assessing whether its future had changed. But every time, no matter how much Feng Qi looked, he died without even celebrating his 30th birthday. This news upset each time more and more. It was too difficult to come to terms with the fact that you are not a rapper, but will enter the 27 Club, even though the young man decided to put his life into helping other people. On his way, he increasingly encountered new and unfamiliar monsters, but there were almost no old ones. Pumping continued evenly. The guy was happy, because there was a chance that killing a certain number of monsters would allow them to be completely exterminated. But he didn't know that a few meters away from him, there was already a blue gorilla demon who wanted to play basketball with the boy. With just 2 fingers, she was able to securely grab the boy without reacting to any of his blows. They seemed to her no more significant than a mosquito bite. Then the young man had to use his ultimate ability, even though after that it took all his strength and energy. The new power greatly frightened the demon, but Feng Qi could not miss this moment, so he remembered how he swam like a butterfly in the pool and pierced the chest of the monster. When it was finally over, just like the first time, he fell down from a great height. His body was exhausted to the limit. Only willpower forced the guy to continue his training in battles. He even carried giant boulders the size of a brand new pickup truck. The power of his blows has also increased significantly. Now it has become possible to break a rock into 2 parts, or even open a bottle of Coca-Cola. He was proud of his strength, because unlike the imbecile main characters from the anime, this one was obtained thanks to his intelligence and perseverance. Although even so, in this world of the future there were a huge number of monsters, which it was not possible to defeat even after long and difficult trials. The young man remembered Velcro, and also that he had not visited her for a long time, having become completely absorbed in upgrading his own abilities. The rabbit was really happy to see the main character. She jumped into his arms without any hesitation, wanting to get more attention. She wanted to show her friend a discovery that had caught her eye a few days ago while hunting local monsters. It was a strange hatch that led to some deep room, but Feng Qi could not say more, looking at the structure from the outside. They boiled this Pandora's box. Most likely it was just another research laboratory, although even so, such finds were extremely useful. They studied and created monsters, trying to get ideal soldiers who could easily clear out the creatures of the domain. This time they came across a place where they were creating many small creatures that could act in unison. The protagonist's surprise knew no bounds when, among papers about various monsters and creatures, he found an article about a shadow. As it turned out, it was not an ordinary monster, but a swarm of small nanobots. Their nature largely explained why other monsters remained at the same level of strength, and the shadow was constantly growing. Now the monster was stronger than even the protagonist's girlfriend. Having learned such details, he did not know how he could defeat this creature, which, like the heavenly general Maharaja from the magic battle, could adapt to any damage. The shadow did not take long to wait, because soon it appeared in the room next to the main character. Although the nature of the monster became clear, it was still a mystery why it was pursuing the young man. It was too unrealistic to fight a monster of such power now, because the boy could not regain his strength. The flock of little robots definitely liked this advantage. They hoped to quickly deal with the main character and then continue their existence. Thanks to the help of Velcro, the boy still managed to escape from the monster's deft clutches, but they came across a huge eye. He flew too low. This was unusual for such a monster, because due to his fighting style, he benefits from being high in the sky. Then they noticed a terrifying monster of incredible size, in whose hands was a sword. The spirit of fire calmly dealt with the demonic eye, showing who the main hunter was. Being almost right next to this powerful creature, the main character and Velcro held their breath, hoping not to be detected. This continued for some time, until the monster was far enough away that this monster would easily defeat them. Having received the opportunity, the young man was finally able to restore his strength. They did not return completely, but a start had already been made. Feng Qi thanked Velcro for his help and was already preparing to go to the research center because he needed to get more information. Our boy hoped to find out the weak points of the shadow and defeat it. This was a great chance if this swarm of robots was really created in that laboratory. However, the plans were not allowed to come true. A familiar silhouette flashed behind the main character again. Returning to his time, the guy wrote down everything just in case so as not to forget. Today he had important matters, the solution of which could not be postponed. In their world, competitions were often held among cultivators, in the hope of finding young dragons who, with the right support, could advance their world. The main character and his class were supposed to take part in this, but not all of the guys could boast of combat experience, even if many of them were hooligans. They had to form an offensive group that would represent them in the upcoming tournament. There were many willing, so Feng Qi had plenty to choose from. The monk asked everyone present not to delude themselves. Even though many of them were good in battles, they were not even comparable to the best students. Therefore, the guys unanimously decided to put up the red-haired one, although he himself did not particularly like this idea. But he could not refuse in such a situation. The boy also asked Mu Qing to help in this matter, because her strength was the most amazing of all the students they could attract in this situation. Thanks to the fact that the guy often helped the girl, as well as her changed character, the blonde beauty quickly agreed. But a monk intervened in the matter, who wanted to find out who was in second place, Lin Ran or Lu Yue, because they were both considered geniuses. The red-haired man was confident of his victory, so without thinking twice, he decided to accept the offer to become the second strongest student in the group. He said with confidence that the blonde did not pose any threat to him because his strength was significantly higher. Lin Ran himself did not agree. Then it was decided to arrange a training battle to determine who was the strongest after Mu Qing. The blonde was happy because he was given an excellent chance to show his abilities. He wanted to prove that his magic was the best. The main character himself had doubts because he was not sure how safe such a competition would be. His reaction quickly changed when his request for a meeting was accepted by the director of the Scarlet Research Center. The guy had been preparing for a conversation with her for a long time. Getting to the place was not so difficult, but the young man was very worried about the chip. He was not sure when it was placed in his body. But I still managed to meet a woman, a beauty with red hair, the same lady who once took Mu Qing from a lonely cell. She was interested in the words of the main character. He admitted that he was a time traveler and even managed to prove it by telling some details from that orbit. From that moment on, the girl wanted to know absolutely everything about what awaited them, because otherwise they would not be ready. Although Feng Qi understood what exactly was motivating the director of the center, they also discussed the chip that was placed in the protagonist's body at that time. If it was not detected by the detector, then this event should happen soon. The girl agreed to help the young man in all his endeavors, on the condition that he would give them a little of his blood for experiments and analysis. The state of affairs was so critical that the boy could not change anything on his own, so he went for help to a superior force. This, the red-haired beauty quickly realized. Miss Wen was very interested in what made the main character so special, so she planned to study him very carefully. The boy himself had already begun to regret his decision, because at first glance one could understand that a serious danger emanated from this man. But he had no choice but to become an employee of the Scarlet Center if he wanted to avoid world collapse. That same evening, as a gift as a sign of their friendship, the Scarlet Institute supplied the boy with a huge amount of consumables, as well as many useful things. There were so many parcels that they could barely fit through the door, but Feng Qi still did not know that a real treasure was hidden among them. One of his acquaintances helped him. He told him that in one of the boxes there were ingredients for the consciousness of a special potion that could help solve the problem of the guy's eternal fatigue. It was a special potion from the Monster Company Energy, which allowed the young man to immediately restore 172% of his energy, even though he had not eaten anything for many hours. The guy could only compare the feeling to the exhilaration of traveling to a frozen continent without any clothes. It was so refreshing. He thought about how wonderful it would be to have a pocket-sized factory for such potions that could create them at any moment. Having finished the mixture, the boy went to bed contentedly, intending to go after the shadow's head again. Now he will definitely have more attempts. The next day, the boy met with Miss Wen again. She believed the main character without evidence, but the other heads of the organization would still need them. The main character promised to provide information before it could be verified directly. This condition suited the girl quite well. They went to a secret place where an ordinary employee of the Scarlet Research Institute would never be able to go. The woman warned that if everything the guy said turned out to be a lie, he would be killed on the spot, just as if he spilled the beans about this place. This option was quite suitable for Feng Qi, so he accepted it. Experiments were carried out on rabbits inside this laboratory. Probably Velcro was the result of this work. It seemed crazy to believe in the young man's words, but his indicators and analyses really looked unusual, and a certain connection between Feng Qi's successes and his stories could also be traced. She decided to talk about how they plan to continue creating rune fighters like Mu Qing, but using an improved method when they will not lose control. For this, a special power stone with restrictions will be used. Although this is an expensive solution, it will allow you to prepare for upcoming disasters. Miss Wen always knew that humanity would not have a good ending. She thought about it for the first time, even before the emergence of spiritual energy. But the girl didn't like to dramatize, so she stopped her story in the middle and decided to leave, leading her subordinate into complete misunderstanding. Now, if the future is truly so dark, the only hope for humanity is the protagonist. If he can't cope, then it's unlikely that anyone else can. There's about 1,000 years difference between the time points, which means that even advanced key masters are unlikely to be able to live that long. Before sending the boy back to the future, Miss Wen decided to show him something interesting. They entered the elevator and he began to slowly go down. The protagonist's premonition suggested that he would soon encounter what he saw then during his first visit. An evil fish demon was waiting for them on the lower floor. His gaze looked incredibly threatening, so the boy was a little shocked. But as it turned out, this monster is quite friendly, even if its appearance was perfect for playing in horror films. According to Miss Wen and the demon himself, they are outcasts who want to preserve the human race, so they are developing effective options for combating other creatures of the domain. The young man was surprised because even though the Scarlet Institute was doing terrible things, they were ready to do such things to protect humanity. Someone must take the blame, although while cooperation with them did not add years to the young man's life, he still dies at 29. The silhouette of a shadow was visible in the red fog. She fought with Velcro, but as always, she gained an advantage in the battle, causing serious damage to the rabbit. One of the blows of a swarm of small robots created an electric wave of incredible power, which threw the good monster towards the main character. He hugged Velcro and asked not to offend them, but to be sure to save himself, he used his fast legs. True, inside the city where the main character decided to flee, it was not at all calm. Many dangerous monsters were hiding around every corner. Their first surprise was a giant snake. It hid behind a column, before attacking Feng-Chi. Its mouth was so huge that the young man could fit entirely into it. However, Velcro is not asleep. She knocked out the overgrown snake like Mike Tyson did his opponents in his prime. They continued on their way, hoping to still find a place where they could take a breath and just do nothing. But ahead there was a strange-looking totem. At first glance, it did not threaten peacefully passing travelers, but in fact it was just another monster. As soon as the main character came closer, he immediately understood why this feeling of anxiety did not leave his soul, because the totem was cursed. As soon as the young man was within range, his senses dulled, and after taking a few more steps forward, he completely lost control of his body. His hand rose on its own. Velcro was sleeping peacefully at that moment and could not help with the next monster. A moment later, the guy began to forcefully squeeze his throat, but this did not happen according to his wishes. The monster got rid of everyone who came too close to him. The young man pressed so hard that he could not even make any loud sound in the hope of attracting his friend's attention. The supply of time was becoming increasingly limited, and Feng-Chi was about to despair because now there was no one to help him. As Velcro suddenly stood up, her anger was incredibly strong. She planned to break this totem so that it would never regenerate again. This stick with a terrible mask was no longer their opponent, because the shadow was once again approaching from behind. It could not let go of its target. Velcro decided to fight for her friends to the last, so she didn't care if some small and weak monster or someone like a shadow opposed her. The battle was again unequal, but even so the rabbit asked the main character to run away, hoping to save the boy's life. Now Feng-Chi was so weak that he had no choice but to run forward, and leaving Sticky alone, he vowed that one day he would save the rabbit himself. He ran so fast that he found himself in an unfamiliar place. Going up higher seemed like the right idea since he could look around and look for shelter. But all that the main character could notice from the top was a giant crater, as if a real meteorite had fallen here. True, most likely something else happened. Next to the depression, someone erected a jade statue of some girl. The boy had never seen her before, but the use of such rare and expensive material spoke of the importance of this person. It took some time to remember this girl. He had previously seen her at the Scarlet Research Institute. This meant that the organization existed until the very end. Perhaps this girl was also known to Mu Qing. Our boy decided to ask his friend upon returning to his world. There was no doubt that this beauty with one eye turned out to be extremely useful for humanity, but the main character did not know what exactly happened. The material of the statue was indeed very valuable. Feng-Chi was not a greedy person, but he was afraid to guess how expensive the construction of this monument was. One way or another, the main character could no longer linger here any longer. If he met the shadow again, it would definitely be a game over. On the other side of the peak, there was a steep descent, and in the distance, the same sea could be seen, so the guy decided to try to get to it. But when he went down, a surprise awaited him. The far-from-weak monster motionlessly observed the situation around him. Its appearance warned of incredible power, but due to the lack of eyes, it was difficult to understand whether the entity was in the mood to attack or not. The young man decided to find out this experimentally, and before he knew it, he found himself in a strong skeletal grip. He had to turn into the Hulk to get out of this trap. Even though Feng-Chi's size and strength increased greatly in this form, the main advantage was that he remained smooth and agility. He could easily fit between his fingers. And having reached the skull, he made one precise blow using the finger torn off during the struggle. It was extremely effective. Only this was not the last obstacle on the young man's path. Nearby was the one whom this deer monster was tracking. The ice monster looked much more terrifying. However, something changed inside the main character. When he defeated this old god, he felt much better. As it turned out, after defeating an enemy so superior in strength, his level increased so often that he underwent evolution into a titan. His performance improved, but the young man doubted that this form was suitable for his fighting style. He hoped for the opportunity to change it in the future. Now, in a few seconds, he destroyed the enemy who appeared, although this was still not the end. A terrifying roar was heard in the sky. It was the same dragon that didn't even pay attention to Feng Qi's existence last time. Now the young man had become someone whose presence could not simply be ignored, so the reptile began its attack. But the main character died not because of the damage received from this creature. The reason was a mysterious figure, which, like a shadow, was difficult to notice in the conditions of thick red fog. The boy saw him only for a second before his head flew off his shoulders, and cold sweat even appeared on his face from such power. Feng Qi just had to find out what kind of monster he met this time. Perhaps this opponent was even more dangerous than the shadow. The boy's awakening was not as joyful as usual. He was tired of dying every time he achieved some interesting result. In order not to make mistakes next time, Feng Qi decided to write down everything that happened to him in a notebook, hoping to later find a suitable option for escape. It's difficult to realize that in most situations, you can simply run away with your tail between your legs because the enemy you meet is stronger than you. So the young man drooped a little. This time he had a lot to do, so the young man decided to indulge in melancholy next time. He is not the main character of Evangelion to whine at important moments. The young man understood that now there were 3 options for his future line. Each of them had different advantages and disadvantages. From the director of the Scarlet University, the guy managed to find out that that girl's name was Mu Yao. So the first option was to follow Mu Qing to meet her sister. The problem with this option was that when Mu Yao appeared, the main character would be 50 years old. Then the only option was to continue cultivation, or join the Scarlet University as a researcher. The guy wanted to get advice from his red-haired friend, but she hurried away so as not to try to judge something that she did not fully understand. Since he became a dark cultivator, he has to do a lot of things that violate morals and standards. He might even have to kill people. This was the fastest way. But the guy decided not to go this route, believing that not only the result is important, but also how you achieve it. The young man was also sure that dealing with the dark forces hiding in human civilization was more important than dealing with the creatures of the domain. To ensure humanity's survival, it was necessary to destroy all the creatures of the domain. Only then would they have at least a small chance. Only now, even with such strong fighters as Mu Qing and Mu Yao, humanity could not win the battle. This could mean that the enemy has a much more impressive force. Previously, the main character had already met incredibly dangerous creatures, fighting with which was tantamount to voluntarily going to death. The young man wanted to get advice from the system, but he did not top up his account, so his subscription to paid services as well as the built-in Netflix were disabled. In the evening, near the bridge, an unknown young man was thinking about life. He was definitely planning something wrong. Lately, nothing in his life had made him happy. He tried to change something, but every time everything didn't go according to plan, and his health only worsened. Before the boy could do something irreparable, the main character intervened. He wanted to get this man into his team. Only to the surprise of the youngest youth, Feng Qi was not going to interfere with him, but on the contrary, he was egging him on. The frustrated guy was a genius at creating virtual worlds. He was called the Savior. He was now working on an innovative idea, but nothing was working out for him.
The guy asked who the main character was and also wanted to know how he knew so much.
But the young man was really interested in how he could save his world, so he looked for different masters and wanted to bring them together to increase the chances of humanity. Before the advent of Savior, all virtual realities were similar to PowerPoint presentations, just as meager and uninteresting. The main character was not going to console his melancholy friend, but only offered to look at the situation from the other side, and he would tell him how to do it. But Feng Qi didn't intend to chase the brilliant programmer, so he went about his business knowing that the young man would catch up with him. And so it happened. The young man was interested in how he could move forward in the development of his software, if he didn't even know what to do. Feng Qi suggested that his new friend first change his attitude. He should understand that everything depends only on the efforts he makes. According to the main character, it was possible to overcome any challenge. Everything depended only on whether you could be creative and thoughtful in difficult situations or not. He promised to help figure it out if the Savior joined his team to save humanity, because no one had a chance alone. Such inspiring speeches by Feng Qi helped the programmer to return to normal. He was finally able to find a guideline in life. The guy met with the director of his university. At first glance, this conversation was not to the young man's taste. Only this was the case until the man announced the size of the prize fund. The rector hoped that Feng Qi would take a responsible approach to the selection of participants and their preparation, so the old man decided to throw in a few more million if they succeeded. The boy decided to talk to Mu Qing about the duel between Lu Yue and Lin Ran. He had doubts even when it was announced, so he wanted to listen to his friend's opinion. The girl did not believe that these two could seriously harm each other, even though the strength of each was quite enough to destroy a small city. These words hardly sounded comforting, but the main character hoped that if something happened, Mu Qing would help stop them. Such trust on the part of Feng Qi greatly pleased the beauty, because now, thanks to the main character, she has the opportunity to communicate with friends. The two were equal in their combat power, with Lin Ran superior in intelligence to his opponent by several points, when Lu Yue was a much more experienced opponent. Although the blonde himself treated this duel as a new, unusual experience, he did not particularly care whether he won or lost. The main character was glad to hear this because he was worried about his friend and his reaction to this fight, yet usually the blonde seems to be a peace-loving person who hates battles. He wished Lin Ran good luck, promising to eat together after the duel was over, regardless of whether they celebrated victory or mourned defeat. This treatment greatly motivated the blonde. Now he was confident that he would definitely be able to win. The battle was approaching. A small clearing was chosen as a place for the duel, far from any buildings or points. Feng Qi and Mu Qing looked completely relaxed as the blonde gathered his last strength due to excitement. Soon the red-haired man appeared in the clearing. He did not want to drag out the battle and promised to deal with Lin Ran faster than he understood what had happened. The blonde himself wanted to quickly wipe that smug smile off Lu Yue's face, so it was he who decided to start the fight. Using earthbending, the blonde filled the surface surrounding them with a multitude of roots and vines, his fighting style being one of consistency. Lu Yue calmly continued to stand while his body was securely tied with bonds, and a huge boulder was already forming above his head. It seemed that nothing could distract the red-haired man. His concentration was so frightening. All the students in the area noticed a huge column of dust that appeared as a result of Lin Ran's technique. He controlled the element of earth at an incredibly high level. The guys were amazed at this turn, because even though each of them knew that in terms of power, the blonde could give a head start to many, but no one expected such a powerful spell. Before Lu Yue had time to recover from the blow, the blonde immediately used the element of water to imprison his opponent in a prison of liquid. For additional efficiency, the boy also gave this water a direction, which turned out to be Tanjiro's water-breathing style technique from the Demon Cleaver Blade. And in order to cause serious damage, the young man created many small blades at the bottom of the whirlpool, which were supposed to kill the red-haired man. But today is definitely Lu Yue's day, because he managed to notice the trap at the very last moment. True, Lin Ran foresaw this too, so he used a huge number of chains to bind his opponent and drag him to the bottom. The handsome man with red hair also decided to show his strength. Before that, he had only demonstrated an incredible level of defense, so everyone was wondering what he would do. He turned his aura into a sharp sword and cut through all the spells the blonde had created to hold it. To appear even cooler, the boy decided to end his series of attacks with a superhero landing. True, our blonde was not so simple. He was able to outplay even this, so he created a fireball behind Lu Yue's back, which was supposed to fry his opponent. Lin Ran had already relaxed, because dodging an attack from behind that was flying at high speed was impossible, even for a genius like the red-haired one. However, to the surprise of everyone, Lu Yue disappeared at the beginning, and then appeared a meter away from Lin Ran, putting his sharp sword-like hand to his head. The main character asked Mu Qing to intervene. She decided to use her runic hand to disperse the two geniuses. The blow was so fast that neither Lin Ran nor Lu Yue noticed it, and the blonde's hands even began to shake out of fear. Our guy approached the red-haired one and praised him, because the battle was indeed very exciting. There was no doubt that if they had not stopped him, the blonde would have been dead. True, taking the duel so seriously scared the young man a little because something really irreparable could happen. Lu Yue had nothing to say, so he simply thanked the main character and his opponent, and then left to go about his business. In the evening, the young man prepared himself a high-calorie dinner, because he soon planned to go to the future. Inspired by the duel of his students, Feng Qi was already looking forward to fighting incredibly dangerous monsters and emerging victorious from the fight. Since the shadow was too much for him, the guy decided to restore his self-esteem on the poor skeletons, who now fled as soon as they saw the main character. The young man stood proudly on a pile of monsters he had defeated and talked about what he should do next. He was a little puzzled that the mole among his acquaintances had not yet been identified, but the time when they would succeed in finding the traitor was gradually approaching. Returning to his time, the boy went to Miss Wen. There was also a date ahead when he could finally prove to everyone that he really was a time traveler. Although even now, after he had helped the Scarlet Institute so much whenever he brought up the topic, the red-haired beauty would start talking to her friend on the phone. The first evidence was the information that Mu Yao allows a girl to cope with old age without any makeup. Miss Wen was a little shocked because she had never told anyone about this information, except for her and Mu Yao herself. No one knew about their meetings. But that was not all. The guy talked about an explosion at their institute that would happen the other day. He asked for full support if everything he predicted came true. The main character asked his new patrons to help him catch a mole who could threaten the safety of not only the guy himself, but also the organization. Everyone unanimously decided to identify this spy, who was so skillfully hiding among ordinary people that it was not possible to identify him without a trap. But in order not to engage in a pointless search for a person about whom they know nothing, the director of the institute began asking the guy about where the contact with the traitor could have occurred. Fengqi began to doubt the professionalism of the red-haired beauty, because if he had known, he would have found the traitor himself, without the help of the organization. But after thinking, the boy finally realized that this could only happen when a huge number of coincidences came together. In the near future, there was only one such episode. In the evening, the boy was delivered another box of supplies from the Scarlet University. But the guy did not have time to use them at the speed that he received. A few hours later, the main character went to a party, where he drank the same wonderful elixir that last time helped ease the pain of Mu Qing's runic hand. The guy turned out to be very weak in terms of resistance to impacts of degrees, so soon his cheeks turned red, and it turned out to be impossible to stand on his feet without someone's help. Although Fengqi himself stated that everything was fine and he could continue to have fun. As a result, his condition became so deplorable that Lu Yue had to take his mentor outside to get some fresh air. He was helped to get to his room by the same person who had previously shown him a guide on how to prepare a potion of vigor. They rarely crossed paths. However, it was this man who turned out to be the same traitor who had been waiting for so long for the right chance to insert a bug into the boy's hand. He made a small incision in the skin and tried to place the card there, but alas, he was caught red-handed, so he could not renounce his guilt.
The main character had no idea that this man wanted him harm, because previously they communicated well and were almost even good friends.
First of all, Fengqi discussed this with the director of the Scarlet Institute to figure out how they should proceed next. It was impossible to remove this man now, because otherwise they would not be able to find the one who gave him this order. In order not to accidentally say too much, the main character decided to notify his students about the problem. They used canvas and pencil for this. Now each of his students knew that conversations around Fengqi were always recorded, which meant he needed to be an order of magnitude more careful. Lepingan, who was the traitor, found himself in a trap. Now each of the students plays a role with him, while the Scarlet University slowly conducts its investigation, trying not to scare off the spy.
The information that the young man's entourage could provide was truly extremely valuable, so all the people who knew about the bug used notebooks to communicate.
The other head of the Scarlet Institute was glad to get rid of this bug, because they caught everyone involved and found out that the spies were sent to them by the dark side. As payment for his help, the protagonist provided the organization with data on immortal soldiers. Thanks to cell-growing technology, they could create an eternal army. Since the organization as a whole is involved in dubious activities, the young man knew that they would accept this as a reward. In case something went wrong, they would repeat the events of The Walking Dead. The Institute understood that anyone who was listed as the creator of this project would become a target for dark forces and other organizations. But despite all the risk, the young man was ready to take on this burden. In general, this did not matter much since he would die relatively soon. The main character did not want to be pitied, but only asked his colleague to collect more data about the dark side while they were given such a rare chance. Now the protagonist's contribution to the history of mankind was incredibly high. According to many magazines, it was he who became responsible for the cell restoration technology. It is common knowledge on the internet that cell regeneration technology is taboo because it can be controlled by domain beings, and this power system should be banned. Only there was the other side of the coin. Everyone wanted to get this power for themselves, even if they openly condemned it. The main character's hostile friend played an extremely important role in this matter. He was a behind-the-scenes player who took on part of the young man's work. Now it seems that everything is not so simple. It is obvious that the discovery of technology gave a huge impetus to the development of mankind, but next time, the young man could be transported to a completely different future. Before leaving, the main character promised to send an email to the girl's LinkedIn account when he died. He asked to disable the spam function until this moment. There were a lot of messages, and many of them the young man called Miss Wen an old woman. This angered her, but the question of how to deal with Mu Qing became more pressing. The red-haired beauty began to suspect the protagonist's teacher, who noticed this talent in him because she was an extremely important person in their society. But she was not hunted. They were going to investigate the shadow as well. If they meet in the future, they must be ready to face any threat. As Fengqi said earlier, the explosion occurred minute by minute. The Scarlet Institute prepared in advance by deleting all the data from that block. Now it seemed unrealistic that they were communicating with a real time traveler, but there was more evidence than necessary. Suddenly, the red-haired girl realized that Mu Yao was a traitor. She had definitely gone over to the side of the enemy, and if they found out that the Scarlet Institute was connected with her, then it would be a game over for them. Now, the outside world thinks that our Scarlet Research Institute is secretly colluding with the rebels and even the domain creatures. Mu Xing's plan to transform people with the help of runes was completed at the Scarlet Sect Research Institute, and the technology of restoring techniques did not whiten their reputation. The Dawn rebels captured the city and killed civilians, but why was the base of their institute untouched, unlike other buildings? They won't be able to justify themselves after a series of such setups, so now the Scarlet Order and the institute under its leadership are working underground. This was the last message from Miss Wen. The main character was looking at this information from the future. He was amazed at how everything turned out after his death, but he could not do anything. When Fengqi left the Research Institute and went on a journey, he again discovered the lair of those ram demons. One of them closely monitored the actions of the protagonist, but the system notified the young man that he should not be perceived as an enemy. But if this demon was not a problem for the young man, then the one who was hiding in the nest during this time could well become a serious opponent. A huge demonic goat emerged from its cocoon and was extremely unhappy that the stranger was on its territory. The guy wasn't sure whether he had a chance against this Hulk, so he decided to do like a real Giga Chad, run away. However, he ran away so often that he came to this point. He had no choice but to take the fight and show who is really strong here. The form obtained after absorbing this creature in another time period was perfect for the battle with ram demons. The main character rushed towards the monster, although initially it did not pay attention to some fleeing insect. When the monster noticed how big the young man had become, he noticed his comrade in him. Their blood was the same. As soon as the main one recognized the young man, the rest of the ram demons began to worship him, greatly helping the boy out because his ultra form had just ended. The guy didn't understand what the joke was, but decided to live for a while under the protection of these creatures, hoping that if a shadow appeared, they would help deal with him. After a certain amount of time, the young man's form underwent major changes. His body became stronger, horns grew on his head, and his hair became much longer. The boy could no longer count how long he had been surrounded by his demon friends, but he understood that the time to leave the nest had already come. Only even having acquired new power, he also hid from huge creatures, just like the first time he found himself in this dimension. After the last move, his body began to feel hungry in this world, so being here was no longer such a walk in the park. The young man decided to continue his pumping, although he hoped that he would not see the shadow again, because during this time it never came to him. He tracked down one of the monsters and, with an equally threatening look, began to attack him, gradually approaching to deliver a fatal blow. Only now the giant creature got ahead of him, devouring the dragon which was the target of Fengqi. The young man could not oppose such a giant. Not far from this place, he noticed a painfully familiar silhouette. It was Velcro, who had been obediently waiting for her friend all this time. And he didn't think about the rabbit at all, leaving the monster alone for such a long period. At that moment, the main character began to hate himself. Now, this animal was the only reminder of Mu Qing, who, although she did not become a criminal, led the rebels. It took a while for Fengqi to stop his tears. There was a touching reunion ahead, and he had to hold on proudly. Even though the guy's appearance had changed significantly, Velcro still recognized her friend, who had not appeared for so long that she missed her incredibly. The young man promised to always be nearby. They met not far from one of the bases of the Scarlet Order. This was very useful, because now the two of them could go to study new things, perhaps being in the future, they would be able to change the past. Hidden among the grass and bushes was a red button. Despite the fact that civilization had not existed for many years, the Scarlet Order made sure that everything remained working. As soon as he pressed this alluring red button, a passage to one of the laboratories opened not far from them. This place looked very similar to the research center that the guy had often appeared in before. The walls brought different thoughts to the young man, because he did not know whether he would be able to return to his own time after this, or whether he would remain here forever. Using the terminal, the young man learned that before he died, he became an S-rank researcher. Many of the data about him were classified, since he was one of the greatest scientists on the planet. True, for some reason the data was previously deleted and then restored again. Perhaps at some point in his life he was again recognized as a traitor. The young man didn't know how to react to such information, so he decided to check whether his favorite manga had been filmed. Suddenly, the face of a scary man with a monocle appeared on the entire screen. The guy thought that virus programs had not disappeared even in this time. Only what happened was not an accident. This man was the last director of the Scarlet Institute, and he left a message specifically for the main character. They prepared in case the young man did come to this place again in the future. Now they could continue to cooperate and achieve success. The main character did not quite understand that he was needed, but was ready to do anything if it would help him restore peace and order. The man said that they conducted a lot of tests to find out how to effectively resist the shadow and its incredible adaptability. In addition, their study allowed us to make many incredible things, so after the conversation, the main character will be able to go after these things and take them for himself. The guy was pleased with such care. He was not sure that after his death someone would seriously leave a message or some kind of prize. Following the old man, another man appeared. He had 3 pieces of news as well as additional information about Xiaohei, or the Shadow as the main character calls him. At its core, this monster is practically immune to any type of influence. It not only consists of a swarm of insects, but on each such bug made of an unknown material there are runes. Now Xiaohei acts as a special organism that has become something more than a bunch of bugs, and the concept of the main character, brain in a jar, was in the final stages of creation. The third news is a gift, Miss Wen. She heard that the main character can absorb the power of the monsters he killed, so she prepared something special. She made a special creature that stands out for its resilience and durability. Usually every organism has a growth stage, after which new cells cease to be produced. But this monster is different. If you kill him, the guy will be able to become immortal, which means he will become an order of magnitude stronger and will fight back against Xiaohei. A shrimp with a rune on its back, Miss Wen believed that this invention showed what a badass genius she was in the world of science. The guy was already thinking about how he would taste the seafood. His stomach began to growl with thoughts of such a delicacy. The girl wished good luck to her friend and colleague, because if he succeeds, the future will definitely change. The words of support really helped Feng Qi, only he remembered that none of these people had been alive for a long time, just like his friends. However, maybe everything will change if he defeats a prepared monster. Of course, it looks like pay to win. But there is a real cheater against him in the shadow, so everything is fair. The boy entered the elevator and indicated the lowest floor available. He expected to see a small shrimp, or, at most, something the size of a lobster. Only in reality, everything turned out to be much more complicated. Over the years spent in captivity, a harmless monster turned into a huge and intelligent monster. The room with him seemed very damp and cold. The guy felt uneasy because the climate outside was temperate. A huge monster appeared in front of him. Only its eye was the size of the protagonist's head, and the young man was already mentally cursing Miss Wen. The young man let his guard down for just a second and was sent flying by a shadow that knew that its sworn enemy would come to this place again. The monster was preparing to finish off the main character once again. Its form changed again, and now Xiaohei's power had become several times higher. However, Sticky couldn't let her friend be disturbed, so she intervened in the fight, drawing the shadow's attention to her. The main character thanked the small but brave rabbit, because now he could concentrate on killing the GMO shrimp. Miss Wen assumed that the monster might evolve during the time it was imprisoned, so she left a special weapon to fight it. The boy had no experience with firearms, so he was not sure that he could handle such a powerful toy. But he had no other choice but to emerge victorious from this fight. One way or another, he went towards the room in which the shrimp was imprisoned. It was not difficult to go through identity verification, but the boy was very surprised when he looked inside. The giant silhouette of the monster did not move at all. It was clear that he was dead, but only what killed him. Then, looking at the chest, the boy realized that such creatures can shed their skin, which means that the monster was actually in the room. And so it turned out, a dangerous entity was already hiding in the shadows behind the main character and was planning to attack. The young man managed to react in a timely manner and attack with his fancy blaster, but the recoil threw him back. The monster took on a humanoid form, although at first glance it resembled the love child of samurai armor and a crab rather than a shrimp. However, the young man planned to use the gun again to get rid of this monster and finally gain his immortality. Only the young man did not take into account that the monster would be an order of magnitude faster than him, so one quick movement was enough for the shrimp to cut off Feng Qi's hand. Due to the painful shock and unwillingness to lose, the guy automatically used the ability received after killing the ram demon deity. Now his strength was enough to resist the artificially created immortal organism. Along with his rage, fatigue also accumulated, so prolonging the battle was an unprofitable decision for the main character. The shrimp also didn't mind fighting and solving the issue of survival quickly, so it took a fighting stance. Since the young man was inactive, the monster decided to attack first. He jumped high and attacked with his claw. Despite Feng Qi's readiness, such a powerful blow knocked him out. Even his super form could not provide a sufficient level of durability. The monster was already preparing to turn the main character into his lunch. He didn't even need cutlery to make the necessary preparations. When one of the main character's horns flew off, he was seriously scared because he thought that this was the end. However, at the last moment the monster stopped, thinking about how he could finish off his prey in a more original way. Before, he did not have the opportunity to go through the options. Then the guy felt that the winds of fate began to accompany him again, and with a quick movement he cut off the shrimp's hands. He was incredibly happy, because he came up with this plan spontaneously, but now the boy could eat deliciously. Only to his surprise, the monster's wounds quickly healed, although his arms did not recover. Such a speed of regeneration was truly frightening. The shrimp did not plan to give up, because it believed that it had every chance of winning this duel, even despite its losing position. In just a few seconds, the monster restored his lost arms, making them several times stronger and thicker. Now he looked like a symbiosis of Deadpool and a Colossus. His speed also increased, so the young man was unable to evade the grab and began bouncing off surfaces like a ping-pong ball. The last blow in the series turned out to be a burial blow, which was supposed to immobilize the main character and cause him critical damage. And to be sure, the shrimp wanted to tear off the hands of its opponent, as he had previously done to it. But Feng Qi did not like this idea, because he did not have immortality. The boy quickly changed his form to a compact one and grabbed the weapon that had fallen from his hands. The monster planned to kill him with massive claws, but the young man was faster. An explosion of incredible power thundered. Feng Qi's victory over the immortal monster was undeniable. The impact damage of the weapon left by Miss Wen turned out to be too high, so a full power volley at the butt caused damage even to the main character. But thanks to the ability of the shrimp, soon the lost arm grew again. He took the helmet of the defeated enemy, put it on his head, and went to Velcro. On his way, he met a thick, bloody fog. A shadow came out of it, which with a deft blow divided the guy in half, just like Sukuna divided Satoru Gojo. The acquired ability did not allow the young man to die, but he understood that it would be very difficult to get out of this mess alive. Velcro was badly hurt and could no longer continue. This attempt ended in failure again. When Feng Qi realized this, he stopped running away. This time the shadow approached calmly, took the young man by the shoulder and brought a sharp claw to his throat. The monster finally smiled as if saying goodbye, after which he sent the guy into oblivion. Waking up on his bed, the main character no longer felt anything, because no matter how hard he tried, he could not emerge victorious from the battle with the super soldier from a swarm of insects. This time was different from the previous ones. The wounds received in the future affected him at this time. It was obvious that this was the effect of the ability left to him as a gift. The pain was truly unbearable, but the main character survived many other much more terrifying injuries. He was determined to keep trying. Even if out of 1,000,000 attempts he only had one chance to correct the situation, he would still take the risk. The first thing the main character decided to do was deal with the mole, who had been supplying their enemy with information all this time. The young man's clothing style changed. His body became much more muscular, and his characteristics increased. Now he could move so fast that the author did not have time to draw him straight. Lepingan received the main character as a guest. Feng Qi was interested in whether something would change if he killed the informant of darkness. The boy had no idea that he would soon go to the next world, but for now the traitor, as a good and hospitable person, offered his friend some tea. Lepingan's seemingly sincere misunderstanding began to infuriate the protagonist, because they both knew very well that they were on opposite sides of the war. The naive and kind simpleton no longer existed. Now our boy was a real Sigma who did not forgive traitors. Even though it was night outside, Feng Qi suggested that his friend take a walk and talk in the fresh air. He started from afar, hoping to extract some information useful to him or the Scarlet Order. They did not yet know their enemy by sight. Gradually raising his tone, Feng Qi informed his former friend that they knew about his betrayal, as well as his true identity. Such frankness confused Lepingan. He was not sure whether they were checking him, or whether this was really a claim and the battle would now begin. It was impossible to take risks, so the boy prepared for the fact that he would have to engage in battle with the genius Feng Qi. Only Lepingan definitely overestimated himself, because only a few seconds were enough for the main character to completely neutralize the mole. He saw pieces of the memories of his former friend, how he was still a teenager in the hospital, his suffering and grief. Next, a clear image of a dark creature emerged in my mind. someone who could definitely organize attacks by domain creatures on human cities. As soon as the guy put his friend's soul to rest, his body began to crumble into dust. First, the skin, muscles, and internal organs disappeared. A few moments later, the skeleton of the traitor also evaporated. The main character did not regret anything, because the conditions of the war were cruel. The next day, the young man decided to see his friends. Not as much time had passed for them as for the main character, so only he was very bored. However, spending money peacefully with the guys, eating another tasty treat was not so bad. True, Fengqi also could not leave his work unattended, so putting on special equipment, the young man wanted to make another vigor potion, like the one that Le Pingan had once made. The main character had certain difficulties with chemistry, so when heated, the liquid did not turn into an elixir, but exploded. I had to take a different route. Fengqi ate to his fill and then fell asleep. When he opened his eyes in the future, he couldn't believe it. He managed to have a significant impact on the future. Now there were no ruins, red fog, and monsters here. It was an endless desert with golden sand. Now a new journey was about to begin in search of solutions to current problems. The young man hoped that he would not meet the shadow again. At the place where the main character appeared, there was a sign with the name of the city. The boy assumed that this was the place where all his friends would be waiting for him. This is a new future world created after they decided to fight against the Science and Technology Research Institute. Only the young man continued to wonder why there was sand everywhere here. If people had won, there should have been roads and megacities, and if there were monsters, then green meadows. Then the system assumed that the presence of golden sand indicates the use of nuclear weapons. In this period of time, it was the main character who led everyone into battle. Ahead, the young man noticed the remains of some ancient and very strong monster, and nearby were human bones. This could mean that both races destroyed each other. The boy really didn't like this initiative. The situation got worse when he finally managed to get to the right place. Instead of welcome signs and fireworks, ruins awaited him. The research institute was buried, so it was impossible to get inside, even with Fengqi's abilities. When the young man approached the tablet, he turned into a skeleton. He didn't like this isekai for the second time at all, because it meant that his path of improvement would have to start from the very beginning. The boy still hoped that somewhere in this world, there were people who were waiting for his appearance with all their hearts. Before the young man could figure out what had happened, a local centipede elder set his sights on his tasty bones. Her gaze made it clear that even though they were both monsters now, they would not become allies, so Fengqi had to run away, literally and figuratively. Each blow could be the last, so the guy avoided such a fate with all his might, hoping to return home safe and sound. When morning came, the guy was exhausted. Even though his body wasn't physically tired, but mentally, running all night from monsters was a little difficult. His attention was attracted by strange sounds that came from somewhere far away. The system suggested that a city might be located in that direction. And so it turned out, although the road was very difficult and long, our main character was able to get to the city of the future before the sun finally set. Before going to the people, the skeleton looked around. Behind it, there were countless monsters that hunted at night. He decided to penetrate the people through the sewer system, but local guards noticed a monster who wanted to enter their city. They used lasers to warn the protagonist. He obediently raised his hands, not wanting to get shot in the skull. But no matter how hard the young man tried to convince the local people to save his life and listen to him, hardly anyone planned to communicate with the skeleton. The boy had to escape under a hail of bullets and laser beams. He was clearly not welcome in this place. Having reached the nearest shelter, the boy looked around. Not far from the city, there was a dump for the skeletons of killed monsters. The place is certainly good. It was possible to hide there not only from people, but also from other monsters. But the main character decided to steal someone's bone and go swinging. Needless to say, Fengqi's strength was incredibly strong, and he only needed 1 day to restore his appearance. In this world, monsters have evolved incredibly. Their sizes, abilities, and types, everything has become 10 or 20 times more complex. Even so, none of them could resist the power of a person capable of moving between points in time. Killing each of them gave the boy new power, which could help in destroying even stronger monsters. This grind continued for several days before the main character decided to take a form that most closely resembled him during life. The city of the future looked impressive, but this citadel was unlikely to cope with the number of monsters that lurked in the shadows. At night, the regular army went out to clear the perimeter. This time everything was different because the monsters assembled a real raid, hoping to crush the last stronghold of humanity. There were an incredible number of monsters. Some of them shot, others hit hard, but there were also special ones. In general, the usual group from Baldur's walked through Gate 3. People did not want to let the monsters pass and entered into a fierce battle with them, although at first glance they did not even have a chance. Only, from the power of modern weapons and spiritual practices, the boy went nuts because they literally incinerated enemies. However, even such technologies were not enough to defeat the horde of monsters, killing the first wave followed by the second, and so on over and over again. The number of victims in this battle was difficult to count, and this happened literally every time the sun set below the horizon. Finding the moment, the young man approached the captain of the warriors. He did not recognize their messiah, but said that even though there was no chance of winning, there were battles that simply could not be missed. Monsters came from everywhere, even from underground. If they retreated, then the civilians living behind the walls would not be able to escape. This is the path of every warrior in their time, so whether they like it or not, hell will continue until one side disappears completely. They did everything they could to resist the monsters, but failed time after time until they were driven back to the very last city. Hearing this was very painful for Fengqi. He decided to go back in time once again to change everything and give future generations a chance. It took him a lot of time to find his old acquaintance in these wastelands. The shadow knew that sooner or later the main character would appear. At his request, she sent the guy on a journey again. Although they were enemies, there was definitely some kind of special connection between them.